My name is Alex Holbrook. I am in the LPN to BSN program at Indiana State University. This is my community health education presentation on child abuse and neglect, education and prevention strategies. Learning objectives. Number 1, define child abuse and neglect. 2, identify different types of abuse. 3, identify risk factors associated with child abuse. 4, describe potential health risks associated with child abuse. 5, identify screening strategies to identify signs of abuse. 6, describe prevention strategies. Before we begin the presentation, please click the link below and complete the pre-test. After you've completed the test, please resume the presentation. There will be another test following the presentation. Child abuse is defined as the act or lack of action made by a parent or caregiver that leads to physical or emotional harm, injury, or death of a child. Neglect. Act or lack of action made by a parent or caregiver that places a child in immediate harm or risk for injury. According to the CDC, 1,840 children died as a result of abuse and neglect in 2019. There are several different types of abuse that we will cover in this presentation. Physical abuse occurs when a parent or caregiver intentionally causing physical harm or bodily injury. However, this is not limited to just striking and or hitting. Injuries can come from burns, bites, kicking, striking, or any other things that can cause an injury to the child. These injuries can vary from minor to life-threatening or even fatal in some cases. Physical abuse accounts for 17.5% of abuse cases in the United States, according to the CDC. Neglect occurs when a child's basic needs are not met by a parent or caregiver. This could include lack of housing, food, education, or proper medical treatment. This is the most common form of reported abuse, and it accounts for 74.9% of abuse cases in the United States. Emotional abuse occurs when a child's psychological health and/or emotional state is harmed. This can come from name-calling, shaming, degrading, or threatening with violence. Emotional abuse can result in lifelong problems, emotional problems, and behavioral problems. Emotional abuse accounts for 6.1% of abuse cases in the United States. Sexual abuse occurs when a child is forced or coerced into performing or being the victim of a sexual act. Although there are many things that can constitute sexual abuse, these are some examples: fondling, penetrating, or other sexual acts. Like emotional abuse, this can result in lifelong emotional problems and problems adjusting. Sexual abuse accounts for 9.3% of abuse cases in the United States, according to the CDC. There are several risk factors for childhood abuse that either the victims have risk factors. Children less than 4 years of age are at greater risk for childhood abuse. Also, special needs children requiring greater care or more attention may be at a higher risk for abuse due to needing more services, needing more attention, or they may have health problems that could create financial burdens and put them at risk for abuse. Risk for perpetrating physical abuse can include drug or alcohol use by the parents or caregivers. If the parents or caregivers have a history of mental health issues, this also puts them at a higher risk for committing child abuse. Lower education, lower income, high levels of stress also can lead to situations where child abuse arises. But significantly, parents or caregivers that have a history of abuse themselves are likely to commit abuse when they have children or children under their care. As for communities at risk for child abuse, areas with higher crime rates and acts of violence, areas with lower income, areas with high unemployment, and unstable housing are also at great risk for child abuse. We will now discuss some prevention strategies. The first way to prevent child abuse is through identification. Identification can be done by teachers, medical personnel, or just members throughout the community. It is important for them to recognize signs of abuse so they can report this to the local authorities, Child Protective Services, or Department of Child Services in order to advocate for the child at risk. Some ways to identify possible child abuse would be injuries. Some of the injuries that may indicate child abuse include bruising in various stages of healing. For example, if the child has several bruises, some of them appear to be days old, maybe even a week old, and they also have fresh bruises. Although bruises can be common in children that are learning to walk or that engage in outdoor play, a multitude of bruises in the various stages of healing can indicate abuse. Dislocations and fractures are also common injuries associated with abuse. Burns and bites could also indicate some form of physical abuse. There are also some behavioral changes that can identify possible abuse. If a child seems withdrawn or depressed, becomes easily agitated or violent, or if they are uncharacteristically anxious or frightened around their parent or caregiver, or possibly other adults. This may indicate that they are experiencing fear related to physical abuse. For children that may be possibly being neglected, they may steal food or money. This could take place in school setting. If the child is not having enough to eat at home, they may resort to stealing food or stealing money to purchase food to take care of themselves. But they also may have poor hygiene or dirty clothes that they are wearing to school. This may be accompanied by an odor that indicates that they are not showering, bathing, or performing the personal hygiene. Other than identification of the abuse, there are certain things that can be done in the community to help prevent child abuse. For example, promoting child abuse awareness can help bring attention to the issue and help people recognize when and where it's happening. Child abuse awareness should be addressed in healthcare agencies, schools, and child care services, or even during community events. There are also community resources that can help prevent child abuse and neglect. For example, having low-cost daycare services as an alternative can help take some of the ease off of parents financially, emotionally, and physically if they are able to have their children in daycare services while they are at work or unavailable. Also, food banks may be an additional resource for parents that are struggling to get enough food for their children where they may be neglecting them nutritionally. Also, it may be helpful to offer parenting classes for new parents or existing parents that maybe need some different strategies for helping take care of their children. There are also some financial assistance programs that may help with this. For example, the food stamp program may help them financially and help them obtain more food for their children to keep them fed and healthy. There are also town trustees that may be contacted to help financially by covering utility costs or costs of a daycare setting for their children. Thank you for listening to the presentation. Please click the link below to complete the post test.